for those who are first time with us, BCS Bedford is very much based around the town of Bedford. So in the good days, when you join us, you kind of come to this beautiful river scene. We usually meet in the Bedford Center Hotel by the river. And we normally will have coffee and cookies, especially for us, as we have in the last slide. But during the lockdown, we are looking forward to be able to get back to that place. And hopefully by February, in our next meeting, we have the chance to be able to get there to meet face to face. But of course, everything depends on whatever is going to be the new rules then. So we'll have to play it flexible. As far as tonight is concerned, we have the theme around the cyber crimes, the insurance, and the aftermath about it. So to me, that is quite an important topic. Folks who know us will know that there are two strategic initiatives that the branch supports. One of them is our annual school coding competition to encourage the young people in our area to engage and participate in the coding. And on that piece, we work with part of the Bedfordshire Police and the Eastern Region Police. But also alongside on a similar theme is that we have been working with the Bedfordshire Police Cyber Hub Unit since the inception back in 2015 on the theme of how to educate all of us so that we are less likely to become victims of crime, because in all truth, they don't have resources to fix those crimes. So it's much better that we do not become victim. And so they don't actually have to register our problem, but not necessarily being able to solve our problem. And this is a situation that have been going on for some years. Perhaps we've kind of come around to see that rather than it is a crime which is special, only happen occasionally, to today, maybe it's happening a lot more regular. So the whole timing, intensity of these events move from perhaps those situations that will be very rare, and so it become a very police type thing, to something more like our car insurance. And so that would be something for us to see. So that is what we're, so Andy, I think I'm already on full screen.
No, Fan, you're not on full screen.
Am I not on full screen? Sorry. No. Apologies. Is this better?
Yeah, that's better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that is the theme and the interest of the topic. Our original plan is to have two contributors. Michael from the Bedfordshire Police in updating us on the current situation, and then Martin, who very much work in the insurance industry. And for little bits of I know that the insurance industry may have a slightly different view from the police around how we tackle the situation. Unfortunately, Martin this morning have to call in and he have some family issues to deal with, so he cannot be with us. So now we'll be having more of Martin's time, and perhaps in this topic, things that we don't necessarily know that much, we have more opportunity through Q&A and the work that Martin is going to share with us to know more and learn more. So what I'd like to do, if Martin is ready, that I'll pass over to Martin so we can learn about all these probably new things, but new in the sense that it will become our business as usual. So I have stopped sharing my screen, Martin. I think you should be able to grab the screen.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Fran. I did a few IT issues myself, unfortunately. I couldn't get my webcam to work. So my presentation is on my computer, and I'm speaking to you on my iPhone, which is a little bit ambidextrous of me, but we'll see how we get on. I'm assuming I can share a screen. I'm just going to try and do this.
Yeah, screen share come out.
and I can see, yeah, I can see that's popped up. So that's working. Wonderful. Good. Thank you. I'm sure I'll get to hear more about the people who are actually on the call a little bit later on. But for now, my name is Martin Blower. I do work for an insurance company. And the subject, as we know, is cyber insurance. I think it's important for those people that may or may not know what my role is and how I actually fit in. So as a broker, we sit between the insurance company and the client. And sometimes the client might not know what it is that they need or may not know where the risks are to the business. And whilst I may be accused of, oh, well, you just work in insurance, so it's my job to go around scaremongering people, I think what's important is that we highlight the risks to the business, and whether that's cyber or management liability or other areas to that business, and allow those business owners to make the decisions for themselves. So in terms of cyber, if they have all of the necessary systems in place to protect themselves, then they need less of a product, but they would know that. And I think as a broker that would look after a company or business myself, it's up to me to fully understand that client's business and to know how it works and where the risks potentially are. So, so for this evening, 4 issues. How big is the issue? I'm sure that there are many people, again, on the call who are familiar with what's actually going on. I'll talk briefly about some of the exposures to various companies and then the types of cover that's available. One of the things I hadn't mentioned is that as a broker, some brokers offer their clients the opportunity to pick from a menu where they can decide, oh, these are the items that I want, so I'll just buy them and I want the lowest price possible. We're advisory. We need to have our own public liability and professional indemnity insurance ourselves for the advice that we give. If I tell a client that their business is at risk and there is potentially a cyber threat to their business, and they decide not to take out any form of insurance, I document that and tell them that I'm doing that, because if in a year's time there is a cyber attack, we may or may not be able to help them. And I already have examples of where that's happened in the past. And a very close colleague of maybe many of you out there, Sean O'Neill, has come to my client's rescue on numerous occasions by helping them out where they didn't have any insurance. And I can talk a little bit more about that later on. So how big is the problem? It only affects the big businesses, right? Well, so they thought, but that is not the case. I recently attended a conference in London, and I was quite shocked how high some of the percentages were on the businesses that were actually being attacked. Action Fraud advised me that 85% now of all fraud is now cyber related. And the reason it's so high is the pandemic. COVID-19 saw an absolute game changer in what happened. Everybody's working from home, systems became more vulnerable, the hackers had more time, and they invested in the online model. So that caused an absolute nightmare for those people that are trying to police it. So we had issues with shopping online, dating online. Suddenly there's a real issue in these areas because cyber attacks have gone up significantly. And one of the biggest problems is how that information is actually reporting. And whilst I want to say some of the numbers are fake, they're not necessarily fake, but they can be viewed in different ways depending on who you're talking to. So for example, the media would report that only 1% of police time is actually allocated to cyber fraud. That line is actually based on outcomes. So therefore, if they are only pinching the bad guys for cyber activities, then maybe 1% is about right. But they can't always get the criminals locked up for cyber attacks. So they'd have to go down the route of misuse of information or selling stolen goods or misappropriation of funds. So there are other areas that the criminals end up going to prison for, and not necessarily the cyber attacks or the cyber involvement. So it looks like we're not catching them. Not me, that's the police, but that they're not doing the job that they should be doing. And that simply isn't true. The police have already told me recently that cryptocurrency fraud is up 24% in the last 12 months. We've all seen the adverts online, come and invest with me. That money has been taken away and people aren't getting it back. SASEG reported an increase. They used to deal with roughly 3,500 reports of cyber attacks over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, fairly consistently between 3,000 and 500. When COVID hit, everyone was working from home. Those inquiries went up to 6,000. They almost doubled. Lockdown has played a huge part in the advancement of these cyber attacks actually happening online. And these criminals, they're just looking for system vulnerabilities. And I can relate that to just a row of houses in a street. If one person goes to work and leaves their front door open, the house next door closes their front door, and the house next door but one locks their front door. Well, the locked front door is harder to get through, so they're just going to walk on in to those houses where the front doors are open, and they're going to steal all of their goodies. And that's the same in the cyber world. The big problem that we have, unless you're a sizable company, then you might not have the IT infrastructure. You might not even know what you need. So that does cause an issue for the smaller businesses, is knowing what do they actually need in order to protect themselves. And the problem is the impacts of cyber can be, long-term and very damaging depending on the nature of the business. I mean, if it's manufacturing or industry related, then, you've got halted production, there's contractual penalties, there's loss of intellectual property, disruption to production resulting in loss of revenue, reputational damage. Or if it's a smaller business that's offering some form of professional services like accountants or small insurance brokers, then you're looking at data breaches and loss of customer trust and customer funds. I think all of those things start to add up to people being a little bit worried and not knowing, what do I need to do? What level of cover do I need in place? And that's why in most cases, they tend to speak to subcontracted IT companies for that advice. And they're great. They know potentially where the holes in the systems are and what processes they need to have in place in order to protect themselves. Now, a lot of these attacks have been branded into subcategories. So I think some of us are familiar with the phishing and the ransomware, unauthorized access. There's also social engineering fraud, which has become more and more clever. I heard a story recently whereby a husband and wife had legitimately set up a business online just selling candles. And they sell a candle for £10, £15, whatever it was. And they'd ask the person to pay, and they'd put all their information into a database, and the credit card may or may not work. So they asked for a second credit card, and they're harvesting data. They're gathering the name, the address, the telephone number, the email, and now they've got a credit card. And because it didn't work, allegedly, they have a second credit card. Of course, this business has just sold a candle, so it sends the client a candle. But if you can do this on a massive scale and do this with multiple customers, then you now have a live database that's worth a lot of money because it comes with credit card numbers and the codes on the back of the credit cards. That information can be sold and traded on the black market, and it's happening without you even realizing. There are processes in place, and some of them will be familiar to us in terms of not giving your credit card numbers over the phone, where banks and other reputable dealers are switching to an automated device where you have to put in the numbers. These companies are legitimate and at the forefront or the cutting edge of some of that technology. But for smaller businesses, it's harder for them to keep up. So the breadth of scope of cover. So like I said earlier, we're advisory. So it's difficult to have a general policy that just covers most people. It's tailor-made specifically for the type of business that it is. But ideally, some of the things that we look at is the social engineering, the property damage and cyber attacks and so forth. Now, the quicker we can deal with this, the less money it costs, because some of these have a built-in business interruption option where we would cover the losses of the business as time went on. And therefore, it needs to be reported as quickly as possible. And I think there's already plenty of examples out there of if you're burgled, you know what to do. But if you're subject to a cyber attack, you may or may not call the police. It may be slightly embarrassing for some people. They might not want to do that. They might just speak to their IT department. They may even just write off those losses. I know for a fact that the banks are subject to 500 to 600 cyber attacks per week, and they don't tell the police. They deal with it internally. They have internal systems to track money, to return funds to their customers. And I'm sure people who are on this call that may or may not have had that happen to them. My wife had a situation 2 years ago with PayPal where £2,000 was taken out of her bank account, and we'd contacted them and the money was put back in 3 days later. I think the larger companies, the banks and the corporations have systems in place to do it. So therefore, whilst it's a good idea, maybe as a hacker, to attack these people, they're a bit more advanced. At the other end of the scale, those businesses that are turning over between £1 and sort of £5 million a year, they're the most vulnerable. They've grown, they're owner managed businesses, and it's very difficult for those owner managers to keep an eye on all of these various areas. So data breaches. What do our customers expect from the insurance company? What a good insurance broker should do is provide help and assistance during that process. So if you've been subject to a cyber attack, the things that you may or may not know, it is a legal requirement to notify the ICO and to keep them updated. Whilst you may approach your IT provider and say, can you have a look and can you see what happened? I have an example of a hotel in Luton where it was the IT company that left a back door open for the bad guys to get in. So it does help if there's a fresh set of eyes looking at the overall picture. So appointing forensic IT contractors and auditors to look after that and to notify the subjects, the people involved. Those people will be you and me. We need to be notified. Is our data being misused? Who is it gone to? And what can we expect and where from? There may be some media fallout, some poor publicity for one reason or another, but we need to make sure that that's being managed efficiently. There may need to be some remedial action that's carried out, credit monitoring, which will help understand where some of those funds have gone. And the bit that the police don't like is that we'll pay the fine or certainly negotiate with the bad guys in order to get the information back, if we can, as safely as possible, as quickly as possible, to make sure it hasn't gone anywhere else, put processes and systems in place in order to secure the business moving forward. And I know there's an argument that says, well, if we pay it, they're just going to come after us again. But what we would do, or what the insurance company will do, is then understand where the risks are to your infrastructure and will help to put a process in place and to cover some of those costs in putting that back together to make sure that your business can continue to run and close any breaches that may be open, as I've just mentioned, in order for the business to continue trading. So a typical policy will ideally pick up those losses for you. Insurance companies have got a little bit wiser. They keep adding to the terms and conditions of these policies, and therefore there is a minimum of things that needs to be done. So, you can't buy a product off the shelf without updating the passwords or the access codes. They have to be changed. You must make sure that your system is backed up at least within 7 days. And those backups need to happen off-site, so you can retrieve them. I've heard all sorts of disaster cases where the disaster recovery was on a computer system that got hacked, that they didn't know what to do. So it needs to be off-site and stored elsewhere. Computer equipment connected to the internet needs to be protected, the right levels of software. So although, like driving a car, yes, we would insure a car, but before we do, it needs to have an MOT. You can't be drunk in charge of it. There are rules that stipulate in order for us to insure it, there's a certain minimum criteria that needs to be achieved. Now, I know that the NCSC would like to see stronger rules in there. The issue that we have is that there's no standard for security. And once a standard security has been agreed by the country, the hackers will just hack it. So that it's an ongoing process. So it's a difficult thing to say, to regulate, because we're dealing with people who are breaking rules, and once new rules are made, they'll break those rules. So there are add-ons that you can buy for these policies, of course, financial crime, fidelity, which is theft by employees. I'd say a good 70% of money stolen from a business is usually done by a former employee. We have many examples. There's a question there, what's the average cost of cyber insurance? So that depends on the risk to the business. So it's linked to how many staff you have, what's the size of the exposure, what's the size of the turnover. So if it's a small one-man band, then the risk is slightly higher, but that can be negotiated down depending on what processes they have in place. So if there's nothing in place, then you're looking maybe £300–400. If the company is a lot larger, then it will go up significantly more. And if you add on all of the additional add-on things, then I think the most expensive cyber policy we do, funnily enough, is our own, which is Luton, Bedford, well, all of the branches within A-Plan. And I think we pay £23,000, but we have 5,000 employees and there's nearly 200 branches. So depending on where you fall, depending on what systems you have in place, the price moves. Like I said, we're advisory, so it's geared specifically towards your business. So we've got some examples. Accounting firms subject to a GDPR breach. We've got ransom attacks, the management consultant, social engineering. I think we're familiar with these, where hackers will just get in, they will look at the MD's diary, they will see when they're in or out of the business, they'll wait for a time when they're out, they'll target the secretary, they'll use the same language that the secretary is used to receiving, whether that's, we've just done a deal on a new premises and we need to transfer the deposit before 11 o'clock this morning, it's £1,000, can you take care of it please? And the secretary goes ahead and does it. Then they'll come back for more and they'll say something like the business itself can benefit by a discount if we pay all of these funds by lunchtime, and therefore there are cases where the secretaries have transferred £400,000 and it's been bounced around and it's left the country, and that was the end of it. I think in these circumstances and these cyber activity crimes that have happened recently, we've got wiser to it. Secretaries need to have mandates. People need to have processes in place where you can't transfer as much funds as that. But these things hadn't come up before. And the secretary thought she was doing as her boss told her to do. So they've become harder to spot. And she thought she was doing, the right thing. I think we also have a duty of care as managers and as managing directors to make sure that we have systems in place that protect our staff and our employees for fear of them being led down the garden path inappropriately. The white hat hacker is a Hiscox case study. This is something that happened to them, and they provided me with this example. This took 10 days start to finish. The insured was contacted by an unknown white hat hacker to collect a bounty for reporting vulnerability to the web server. Hiscox were notified at about 8:20 in the evening. They immediately engaged cybersecurity consultants to conduct an IT forensic investigation. The following day, they confirmed that 44,000 data subjects have been breached, lots of sensitive information in there. Hiscox employed legal counsel at this point to determine the next steps. The services of a PR consultancy was engaged with, and a credit monitoring agency. They also spent money on a call center. All of these costs were taken care of by the cyber policy. There was a serious breach, obviously, and the regulators and the individuals affected were notified. Day 8, the legal team had secured an affidavit with the hacker. Yes, the insurance company had negotiated with the hacker. It's damage liability at this point. It's what they can get away with. They will pay, the insurance company will pay the hackers to get that information back. Once they've got the information back, they can then bolt all of those security issues down, change the systems, and advise those businesses accordingly on what they need to do moving forward. Day 10, they notified the ICO and affected parties, was sent a sort of breach response mechanism that was put in place, and a press release was issued. The overall outcome, swift comprehensive action was taken after the breach, ensured that the press reaction was broadly neutral or positive. The ICO, now they're in a position to fine. They say that businesses should have robust systems in place. They are responsible for data, and therefore, if there is a data breach, then you are subject to a fine. In this case, the ICO opted against issuing a fine with the statement, "We welcome the remedial steps that were taken by the client in light of this incident, and we have noted that they all of the names of the clients that had been breached were all offered some credit monitoring so they could see if the information was being misused in some way. That was all done free for the person that had paid for the insurance. The insurance company had picked up those costs as well, just to make sure that if something was to go wrong, that the costs were taken care of. There's also areas where I think just to have somebody to hold your hand through a process, and insurance companies have got better at doing this. I think 3 years ago, they weren't so good. They didn't really know what they were insuring. Initially, when cyber insurance policies were first brought in, they looked at a business that was turning over £100,000, and they said, well, if that business doesn't turn over £100,000 because of a security breach, we will insure that business for £100,000 for a 6-month period. And therefore, a cyber policy was very much like a business interruption insurance policy. And they didn't really care too much what systems they had in place. They knew that if there was a loss of £100,000, they would be paying a premium that was reflective of that. As time gone on, the same as with car insurance. Car insurance in the 1970s, you would have to pay extras for your radio. You'd have to pay extras for whether or not you had a sunroof or other bits and pieces. Now, all of that is included in one policy because they've got wise to it. Systems are better. They can tell what type of vehicle you've got now from a number plate. And this is the same with cyber. Cyber insurance has become more adaptable and more based on the circumstances of the business. So there was quite a bit in there. I am open to questions and to open up a discussion for us to talk about it. There are, like I said, lots of different insurance companies, and the reason we use different insurance companies because companies like Aviva are very good at cyber insurance for accountants and law firms and sort of professional services, whereas companies like Hiscox are better at estate agency and maybe construction. There's other companies out there that will offer various levels of insurance, and therefore, without knowing the specifics of the type of policies that are required, then we're there to guide and to move people through the process as easy as possible.
Wow, that's great, Martin. That's a really good background. I think I learned a lot more than I did before. I'll have to think through, do I need something? But I'll kind of follow up with the questions that is already on chat first. So Ian have a second part to his question and ask, do insurance companies usually do a tech audit on site before providing an estimate?
They don't normally. It can be requested depending on the size of the policy. So if it's a sizable business with a turnover of maybe 5 to 50 million pounds, then I can request that. But also I could request that for a smaller business. Depending on the broker that's being used, they can or cannot do it. Depends on how confident the broker is that they can write that business. I could write insurance for an airplane if I wanted to. Would I be good at doing it? Probably not. So it's about knowing the limitations of your own ability. And I have two guys who work in the office with me who are very good at sort of cyber security, and they can write most of that policy along with the insurance companies themselves and go out to market and to get it. But if a business wanted a review, not just of cyber, but for any part of their business, then we can call in specialists to go through things with them, especially if they feel that there is a risk. Most people will just put their hands up and say, I know there's a risk to my business. Can you tell me what it is, please? And then I can do something about it.
So if I understand correctly, people ask you, you can give them a quote without having to go on site, but then they may invite you to go on site and negotiate down your quote.
Sometimes, in most cases, cyber insurance is already part of the public liability and employer's liability and the insurance review. I do have some clients that have two insurance brokers. Those that are price sensitive will use one to try and get the price down from the other one. The only issue with that is that sometimes you have a crossover in policies and you're not always sure who's doing what. And I had that recently with a local accountancy firm who told me on numerous occasions that they had a management liability policy, which is a sort of directors and officers insurance. And I asked to see a copy of it, and they said, no, it's through our professional association, it's all taken care of. And this year, I got a copy of that policy, and I could see that there were a number of things in there that they didn't have. There was a cyber insurance policy, part of it, but it was capped at £10,000, and it wasn't fit for purpose. So, you know, my advice is you kind of need to trust your advisors, whether that's insurance, accounts, a lawyer. You need the best people around you in order to get the best out of your own business.
Great, thank you. And we have a question from Joe to ask, have any NHS organizations taken up insurance?
As far as I know, NHS aren't insured.
Okay, so the government pick up the bill.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Yeah, they have a huge amount of information.
Well, they have a huge amount of liability, and therefore it's difficult to insure. There's a couple of businesses that aren't. So things like most public sectors, so schools, buses, government buildings, council houses, tend to all be insured through one policy called Zurich Municipal. And Zurich deal with it directly, and it's a government policy managed from the Chancellor's office. But there are companies that are just too big to insure. So BP, for example, has no insurance.
Okay, okay. I'm not too sure. I want to make them my target, but I'm not in that business.
Yeah.
Great. So Stuart, have a question. Do insurance companies refuse to pay out if the company proves to have poor security processes?
That they need to satisfy the conditions of that policy. So again, the insurance broker would need to, in most cases, we'd go on site or would have a good understanding of the business. We would say this policy is subject to, you can't have password 123 as your password to every log on computer system that you have. So there'll be a minimum amount of security that's required in order for the policy to pass. Now, as an insurance broker, I can't sell an insurance policy that's not fit for purpose, because if I did, then I'm liable myself. So we have had cases where people have been told to do things. So an insurance company will come and do a full review. They may even, if there's been a big claim, they may even send a loss adjuster. The loss adjuster will make some advisories, and those advisories would need to be carried out. So it's my responsibility to make sure that they have. And and the insurance company will give you 3 months or 6 months to do these things. And once they're done, then we're all good. That insurance company will continue to insure you. If you don't follow as they say, then they will cancel insurance. And once you've had insurance cancelled, it becomes more challenging to find a company that will then insure you, because already your business is branded as somebody that fails to comply.
Right. So it's a bit like car insurance then.
Yeah.
Great. Then we have another question around ISO certification. Does it help to reduce insurance costs?
It doesn't, unfortunately.
Okay, so cyber essentials, things like that, they don't count.
Depending on the policy, so cyber essentials, Hiscox take a view that you get a discount for that with Hiscox, but Hiscox may not have a policy that's suitable for your business. And I think a lot of these accreditations that are available need to be recognized by insurance companies, and currently they're not. And there are some lobby groups that are trying to do that.
Okay, so it's an ongoing thing, and so despite all the government advice and even the police advises to do the cyber essential, when we come to the money side, it doesn't quite cut.
It's in exactly the same way as we're trying to get discounts on fleet insurance or car insurance because you have cameras.
Right. Okay. I'm going to actually a question from myself, because I seem to get a message when I listen to some of the service provider on cloud-based everything to suggest that if we move everything to the cloud or the Office application, etc., then we are more secure and better protected. In your experience of breaches, does it really work, or is it really just a sales message from the cloud providers?
Cloud is one of many methods that are available, I think. The importance is to have access to your information should you have a complete shutdown. So if you lose, there's two parts, I guess. There's the operating system, and then there's the data within that operating system. And in my experience, they tend to attack the operating system. So they wipe it out. So you may be left with your information, but you can't access it because you haven't got an operating system to use it to gain access to that data. So a new operating system would need to be built, and that would take time. In some cases, they might just attack the data, or they want the data, so they steal the data. So I think cloud just makes it easier. I think if you're subject to a cyber attack and you're a small business, then you can dispose of all of your IT. You can go to the local supermarket, buy new computers, log onto your cloud with your passwords, and off you go again. So it's the easiest way to do it. But I think for a lot of bigger companies, they use data centers and they back up. I know that Subway and Domino's, I think, use a data center in Luton.
Right. Okay. That's interesting then. So it's not necessarily that it make it more secure, but it make it easier to recover in case anything happens. Yeah,
I think, if it's stored physically in a building, I mean, all cloud data is physically stored somewhere. I think what's beautiful about it is we don't know where it is.
Right. Okay. So that is interesting. Another topic that is more kind of in my personal interest is that you mentioned social engineering as an important threat vector.
Yes.
But essentially that depends on people. And when I have to do my annual training on security, I do it diligently. But I think some of the other people maybe just doing the training as a tick box exercise. So how can you tell, will you have something that tests how serious these people are in order to assess their risk, or you just kind of rely on that the organization have some kind of training for everybody?
I think in most cases, insurance, I try and be more thorough. I would definitely look at what existing policies do you have in place. So for example, if it's transferring of cash, then all employees within the business can only transfer up to £500 or £1,000. So you've already started to lock down threats to the business. Where are the other possible security breaches? And depending on the business, it may be that you're paying for stock every week, and suddenly, you know, there's some social engineering that goes on where someone's gone in there and some numbers have changed or some account details have changed. You know, somebody will know that the account details have changed because it's usually set up and it's a link through on a bank account, and that's not it. You might get a fake invoice with fake numbers on it for £200, and when you go and pay the £200, because the system already has the old account numbers in it, they'll just get paid £200. It'll go to the right person, and they won't know why they've received it. There'll be little problems in place. Sorry, there'll be situations where, ideally, if there was a change of account numbers on something, then that can only be authorized by the business owner, or, you know, two of the trustees, or however that's set up. But so what insurance companies would be looking for is policy. What is the process for? Can we have a copy of an employer's contract? Can we have a look at what systems do you have in place to minimize the risk? And they'll be looking at that. And in some cases, if the business is turning over £200,000, they won't look, because they'll just think, well, the risk is minimal, so therefore they'll take the hit. If you're turning over £50 million, then they'll want to know, and they will ask for copies. They'll want to see them. And there's no point me sending copies of these contracts to the insurance company if they're just going to come back with a bunch of changes. I need to preempt what those changes are going to be, and I need to have those discussions with you first.
Right. Okay. So if I understand the essence of it is that an organization with robust system against fraud is already a robust system against cyber fraud.
Yeah, to a degree, ish.
Great. Right. There are the interesting questions on the chat. Joe is asking that he works in NHS, but he has meeting with some colleagues in a Dubai hospital, which is a private-owned hospital. Will these kind of privately owned hospital be able to get cyber insurance?
Yes. So privately owned hospitals will have levels of insurance already. They'll have some form of malpractice insurance. It'll be really expensive, in the same way that professional indemnity insurance is very expensive for lawyers. They will have exactly the same, and they will have access to. We can already do cyber insurance for dental practices, opticians. There are plenty of these privately owned medical facilities in the UK that we already insure. So yes, it's just the NHS. I think as part of the NHS's due diligence, they would have to ensure, if they're outsourcing to private companies, that they've got the relevant insurance in place, and they would want to see sight of those documents. And those documents should be available, public liability and employer's liability, to all the staff.
Great, thank you. We have a comment from Stuart about the controversy, the balance between the insurance companies willing to pay ransom demand and the fact that it may be rewarding the criminals. So are there any discussion or agreement between the industry and the law enforcement around these, or is it still everybody trying to get a better position?
In my experience, the police and the National Cybersecurity Centre don't like the fact that insurance companies pay, because, you know, why would you? So from the insurance point of view, they're only what they're trying to achieve is that the client is back up and running as quickly as possible. And the quickest way to do that is to pay, which the client has already paid an insurance policy. And in the same way that we're paying credit agencies to make sure that people aren't affected, to make sure that we've spoken to call centers and PR companies, and all of these costs mount up. One of the costs potentially is the £25,000 you have to give Mr. Malware to say, can we have our data back, please? And they do pay it. They do work with police. There is a website called www.cyberalarm.police.uk. That's free, and that if you go to that website, there's some software that can be downloaded, and it just sits on your computer. I'll give that email address again in a moment, but that just sits on your computer. And if there's any form of malware or disruption, the police will pick up on it, and they'll be able to do that because they've got hundreds of these bots, as they were, sitting on people's computers, just looking for bad guys trying to gain access. The insurance companies do work with the police. The banks less likely so. The banks tend to just deal with the problems themselves. If you've lost £1,000, they'll give you £1,000 back, and then they'll go and chase it wherever it's gone. And in some cases, they just write it off. Right. Okay. So yeah, that website again, www.cyberalarm.police.uk. It's free software, and if you don't mind Big Brother, they're not looking at your data. They're not looking at what you do. They're just looking for cyber attacks.
Is this for business or also for individual citizen?
It'll be for businesses, because they're trying to. I think they're just trying to protect those businesses and get to you before anything bad happens.
Right, that's quite useful. That is certainly something that perhaps some of us can look at. Thank you very much for that. Andrew have a question around the Hiscox example that negotiation legal support is provided. Now, I have to say I didn't quite get the key gist of the final bit of question. How do we know as business consumers that these types of services are covered?
Yeah, they'll be in the terms and conditions of the policy, and the policy is made up of the sort of basics, the core things, and then there'll be again, it's up to the broker to go through, and the broker will know your business, and therefore the broker is already insuring public liability, employer's liability. The brokers should come and visit at least twice a year. They should do a full review. In my experience, clients put it off. They don't want to do it, or they're too busy making the widget. But we insist, and quite often we'll just put a note on the case to say, we've tried 3 or 4 times to get an appointment to go through things. The clients tend to feel, oh no, they're just going to try and sell me something. And I think it's just down to knowledge. I think everyone needs to be open to listen to everything and then match it against their own experience. They'll know what they're good at. They know if they're good at IT. They know if they're all good at making the widget, which is why they're in business. But it's the things that they don't know. They're not very good with accounts, so we need good accountants that give advice that you can trust. And the same with insurance, especially if cyber is a risk to the business. Then you want a good broker that's going to understand the business. And also we want 2 guys from Hiscox to come along and to go through and to make sure that it's rock solid and that the policy that you have is fit for purpose.
Right. Andrew have a supplementary and suggests that it's probably the head of IT and security that should sit down with the broker and not just to leave it to finance.
100%. It needs to be a collaboration. Where possible, I like to speak to the managing director because he's the one ultimately responsible. Sometimes the FD has a different agenda. They may be focused on price. They might not even want to do it. They just see insurance as a thorn in their side. They're their objectives are not always aligned with the business owners, in my opinion.
Right. Okay. Interesting. That. I have one more on my own. Is that if the perpetrators are foreign rather than based in the UK,
Yes.
that means it's more difficult to get the money back, or maybe in the negotiation. Do you see more of the attackers in the UK based around UK, or are we having a lot of foreign attacks?
It's difficult. In most cases, I don't know who they are. I've never met any. I've never spoken to any. I've never seen them. I have been told that that there's 5.9 million businesses in the UK, and China's looking at most of them.
Oh,
so I don't know where these people are. They may be UK based. They may be abroad. The insurance companies negotiate with them in order to get data back, and then once that's paid, usually into a British account, and then it's bounced around and it's gone off somewhere else.
right. Okay, that's interesting.
So I think that the whole cyber model is global. I don't think it's country specific.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Right. I'm just checking. It seems we have answered all the questions in the chat. Maybe we'll give a minute or two to see if there are any further questions or comments.
Ben, can I,
online.
this is Severio. Can I ask a question?
Oh, go ahead, Severio.
Martin, thank you very much. A very, very good presentation there and details. Just really, are you able, without revealing things, are you able to share a good story and a sad story at all in 2 minutes that you've come across?
I can share a story where the one that Sean helped me with, and I'd spoken. So the hotel in Luton was the Icon Hotel, and I have permission from Franco, who's the owner, to tell the story. We'd gone to his hotel, we'd done a review, I'd identified some exposures. One of those was IT, and he said, no, I don't need that, I'm fine. I also identified terrorism, and people think, oh, I won't need that either. But if you change the names of some of these things, so don't call it terrorism, call it denial of access. So, you know, if the road gets shut down and you can't get your clients or your customers to your hotel, then, you know, that's whatever you're charging per night times per room plus meals, you're out of pocket. And therefore, that's something that needs to be considered, and that wouldn't necessarily be picked up in a normal insurance policy. So with the cyber, you know, I said, potentially there's a threat. He said, how bad could it be? And I said, well, if you lost all of your systems, then, you know, what's your average daily take-ins? And that would be gone. So anyway, he said he'd come back to me, and then 4 days had passed and he'd said no. And then I promise you, I didn't sell his information to a hacker. But we all know what happened next. So he had in his back office systems a box appear on his screen that said, we're currently holding all of your systems. Please pay £10,000 by 3 o'clock this afternoon, and we'll release it back to you. And he didn't. He ignored it because he didn't believe it. This was about 3 years ago, and maybe 4 years ago. And 3 o'clock came, and that was it. They disabled their systems, and then he was told that it's now £25,000 to put it back. And his checkouts had gone down, the tills had gone down, so he couldn't he couldn't put any money through. He couldn't sell drinks because the till wouldn't open. He couldn't charge people when they were leaving the hotel. People had ordered things and all the bills had gone. All of the interactive TVs had been disabled. So it was a real problem. Anyway, he called me and said, what can I do? And I said, well, we had the conversation around cyber insurance, and you were going to take the risk. So the cost of that today is £25,000 that you need to pay the ransomware people, in a hope that you get all the information back, and you can charge your clients who are staying in the hotel the money, and you should be back up and running, back to normal. He said, well, I'm not going to pay them. I said, okay, so therefore you lose everything and you'd have to start again. So, you know, ideally, I wouldn't even wipe the servers, buy new servers. There's a cost of infrastructure. And he said, okay. And he said, well, what about my IT company? And I said, well, you can talk to them. I said, I don't know, you know, what advice they would give, but, you know, that's where we are. Okay. So he accepted the fact that he wasn't covered and his insurance company couldn't help him. And only at that point did I go away and speak to Sean O'Neill. I don't know if you knew Sean, but Sean helped me out on many, many occasions. And I'd explained what had happened. And he parachuted in with a couple of forensics guys, and they looked at the computer. And he called me and he said he shouldn't talk to his IT company because it was his IT company's fault. They were in doing some maintenance work and left a back door open. And that's how the hackers have got in. So technically, the IT company could claim on their own insurance policy to put this problem right, or the IT company just provide him with a new operating system. And if Sean and the police can tell him, you know, what to do and how to lock those systems so it doesn't happen in the future, then we should be okay. And that's exactly what they did. They wiped everything. The hotel had written off the cost of the rooms for one night, the anything that may be charged to those rooms, and they basically closed the bar, closed the restaurants, so they you know, minimized their losses, and they built him a new operating system for free, and he was back up and running, and he was very grateful to me for helping him out. The irony to this story, of course, is that he still doesn't have cyber insurance.
Oh God.
Oh, just for the folks who are kind of not local, Sean O'Neill that Martin mentioned is a good friend. He's actually lived across the coast from me. It's even a neighbor. But Sean has been part of the Bedfordshire Police cyber team in advising business how to be safe. Last year, he moved on to another private sector job, but during his term in the police sector, apart from working with the business as individual business, he also formed a regional trust network with companies that he can bring in to help victims when they got into trouble, because Sean's position is he have not enough police resources to solve the crime, chase a criminal. But if he can get a small number of trustworthy company, and that include Martin's good company, as well as some of these forensic people that is in the group, that when something happened, he have a number of people that he can call and see if a small team can jump in and resolve situation like what Martin have just described. So he have built up quite a good thing for our local region and network. But Sean has last year moved on to a private sector company. I'm sure he's probably a bit more rich than when he was in the police force.
Yeah.
But
I think so.
He's a great guy, great friend.
He has been, his position was replaced by a gentleman called Paul Lopez. And I think, I don't know if he was involved with the setup of the cyber centers across the country, because they started to look at this and they formed the cyber resilience centers. There's 8 of those now around the UK, and they all report back to Action Fraud. And I think they're doing a lot of that work now that Sean used to do.
Yeah, yeah. Martin, you talked about the IT company. In all of this, really, I mean, you know, we don't know what the actual things is, and I hate to speculate, but if that was the case, it was the computer company that should be held accountable because they left the back door open.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was a negotiation between the hotel and the IT company. Franco's a little hot-headed and probably, you know, got his system back up and running and then parted company with them, whereas I would have negotiated reduced rate for the next 5 years or something. But anyway, that didn't happen. I think he took the losses on himself. He got his operating system back up and running, and as far as I know, I think they did part company, but I think they're back together now. But, you know, as business owners, everyone would deal with that differently.
Yes, yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that, Martin. Yeah.
Pleasure.
Just checking if any more questions from the folks online. My silence counting to 20, but if you don't have a question, can you help us, please? Because with something like 40 people on the meeting today, there were 87 registrations. So I think the no-show rate seems to be keeping to the normal standard. But for those of us who are joining the meeting, not within the Bedfordshire, Milton Keynes, Buckinghamshire area, can you drop a line to say where you call from so we can understand our geographic reach? That would be really, really helpful.
How do you want people to do that, Fran? Because I think otherwise,
they're all on the chat. They're all on the chat.
All right.
So Newcastle at the moment is the furthest we have. Oh, Vienna beats that. New Zealand.
Very good. Wellington,
Martin, I think you are now famous down south.
Lovely. Hong Kong. Oh, fantastic.
Well, US. Wow.
There you go. Martin, you had a long reach.
Yeah, I was shocked. I'm glad I didn't know. I'd get worried.
Okay, Kingston. Very good. Very good. Well,
very good. Thank you. Thank you very much for your help. And we probably getting to the point where we have to say thank you to Martin. But just before we do that, what I'd like to let people on the call know, especially for those who are not based around here and our regular, is that the committee have set up the coming year's program. We're working towards it. We're going to skip January, but our intention, if everything goes well, that we can have our face-to-face meeting again, that we'll meet in the Bedford Hotel in February, and it will be a hybrid meeting. I mentioned that we run the school cyber challenge competition, so we're aiming to use the 14th as a launch of our 2022 competition, as well as inviting some of the award winners of this year's competition to showcase their work. Some of the things that these year 5 to year 10 students can do is just really very good. I think it'll be good for us to encourage the younger generation to continue to work and go in. One of the themes that our police colleagues have been working on is that we want to encourage the young people to develop the skill, knowledge, and passion in computing and work on the correct side of the law, rather than some may find that it is easier to earn money on the other side of the law, that we have to buy insurance again. So that is something that we are very interested to do. And then in March, we're wanting to explore these concepts of no-code computer or little code computing, so we can get people into that without the massive coding that we have. April and May are the 2 months that we are working on joint events with other BCS specialist group. We have the Prompts SG connected already. We're working with the second SG that we're working with. So if some of the folks on the call is from an SG that you find that maybe working together on a joint meeting is of interest, please make contact. Again, working on the basis that we will be back to the more normal. We're inviting people in June to visit Cranfield University into new Digital Aviation Research Center, and as well as the autonomous test track in the university, as some of the way that the practical application of computing is impacting our society. And in July, we still haven't fixed it yet, but our intention is to invite 1 or maybe 2 of the local regional tech R&D lab innovative developer to share some of their work, so we can understand and be able to celebrate the good things that is happening in our local area. Come the July time, hopefully we'll be able to get everything back in normal, and then that's our usual season to do the celebration of the award winner of the competition. We also, until the pandemic, organized a family fun day in the Museum of Computing in Bletchley Park. That is a heavily subsidized event for members and their family. So there's also children as well, and the museum lay on games and other activities to get the whole family into understanding a bit of the computing and have a bit of fun. So we weren't able to do it in the last 2 years. We hope and pray that we'll be able to do it in 2022. And then come August, if everything is allowing us get to normal again, we may try to organize some kind of a garden party, because within the branch executive, we firmly believe that it's not just us, the profession, who need to come together, but it's also the rest of the family coming together. The social interaction side is as important as our professional exchange, so that as a community, we can grow and learn together. So we hope, if this is of interest, you can stay in touch with the Bedford branch contact list, and we hope earnestly that in 2022 we can actually meet you in person in Bedford. And for colleagues who are going to be in New Zealand and further afield that want to connect with us, we will continue the Zoom connection, so we can stay together face to face as well as online, and keep this all as a community. So we hope to see you at some other time. But one final question for Martin, which I forgot to ask you earlier, is that BCS have recorded the meeting. With your permission, we can release the recording after it is edited to go to the BCS YouTube. Is this something okay, or is it something more restricted?
No, that's fine. Absolutely okay.
Perfect. So we can then have the information, and we have Ian ask if we can circulate a copy of the slides, and if that's okay, then if you send it to me, we'll make it on the PDF and we'll add it to the branch website. Okay, I'll email that across to you in the next 10 minutes.
Yeah,
brilliant. Thank you very much for your wonderful talk, and help us to understand the practicality of the business.
Yeah, Fan, do you want to just type out the I'm hoping everyone knows our branch BCS website.
Okay, I forgot what it is, but I'll say we can use this great search engine. If folks search for BCS Bedford on your search engine, you should find us.
You should get it. Yeah, both Twitter, Facebook, and website. Excellent. And LinkedIn.
Absolutely. So
lovely.
Well, thank you everybody for giving us our time, and particularly thank you to Martin for the preparation and sharing your great expertise. I think I live a little bit more at ease to know that we have ways to get ourselves covered. I'm a governor of our local school. I now need to talk to our clerk to see how well we are covered on our cyber.
100%.
Great stuff. So for those of us who are unmuted, let's give Martin a great round of applause before we say goodnight.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Lovely.
Thank you very much for listening, and thank you for your questions.
Thank you. Lovely.
And good night, everybody. And
good night, everyone.
See you again sometime soon.
Yes.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
Good night, all. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Dr. Fan.